G'day, this is my porch, and this is my partner Mouse. Here she is knitting on the floor, and in the kitchen, and on the couch. It seemed to me that she might like a comfortable rocking chair to sit on while knitting. So in this video, I'll show you how I turned an old dining chair into this, the Porchmaster 3000. Okay, it's just a rocking chair. Let's begin. I took my mother-in-law's old dining chair and tested its rocking capabilities, to get a feel for it. I drew a scaled elevation so I had something to follow. I measured the distance between the legs so I can make a template for the rockers. I used some old form ply from the scrap pile and roughly worked out the length I need to be 900mm. Using string and 2 nails, I sketched out an ellipse to get the curve of the rocker. I'm sure there's a mathematical way to do this, but trial and error worked for me just fine. I cut the board down the middle, screwed it together, and then cut out half the ellipse on the bandsaw, so I had 2 rockers which were exactly the same. My technical drawing from earlier wasn't very helpful, so with a bit of googling I was able to distill hundreds of years of craftsmanship into a quick tilt and hand gesture to get the rockers right. And that looks pretty right. Before I go cutting into the chair, I wanted to see if it actually rocked. So I attached these little mounting feet and clamped them to the chair. Clearly, I'm a little bit more skilled than Mel Gibson. And the chair rocks. But it felt weird and needed some tweaking. So I put some blocks in the front to increase the back recline. Eventually I found that by raising the front 30mm, I had achieved the optimal rock. I scribed in an offset line with a marking gauge, which is a new tool in the workshop for me and has completely changed my life, so definitely recommend you go and get one yourself. After cutting the final shape, I sanded the profile back to the original curved line. I'll be attaching the rockers to the chair legs by cutting a groove and pinning a dowel through it to keep it in place. I cut the back leg shorter by that optimal 30mm. Using the template as a guide, I then marked some lines to follow with my saw and began cutting out the grooves. At first the saw wasn't cutting, so I figured it was blunt and muscled through it, before realising the obvious. I'm making a rip cut, which I don't often do with this saw. So a quick flip and we're off again. I had what I thought was at the time a genius idea to use a spade bit to hog out the middle. And look, anything would have been better than this, but it did do the job. With a little bit of tear out. In any project I make, I like to try and use hand tools as often as possible, like this chisel, and mortise chisel, and not so useful metal file. I'm now so skilled at these tools that I absolutely didn't need to use a trim router to cover up my mistakes. Note to self, sharpen your chisels better. Alright, so the grooves are cut and the template slid in well. Now it's time to actually make some real legs. Last week, in a rush, I bought this old floorboard and must have forgotten to think because it wasn't big enough. I double checked the arrangement and yep, it still doesn't fit, of course. Plan B. This breakfast in bed table I whipped up with breakfast once. I don't have time to make breakfast in bed for my partner these days on account of making her a jewellery box and a lamp and a 5-hit bench. So it needs to be sacrificed for the greater good. Fortunately, it was the perfect size. I cut fairly close to the line, leaving about a whisker, and glued the templates with blue tape and super glue. I thought about freehanding the rockers with a spoke shave, but since I was already using routers, I may as well have my cake and eat it too. I used an inverted flush trim bit to follow the template first. A router table would have been great here, but if I can prove anything, it's that you can never underestimate the versatility of clamps. After the first pass, I flipped the piece over and finished the cut with a regular flush bit. I have to notch the new rockers into the groove because they are quite a bit thicker than the template, which is where things started to get interesting. My first goal was to notch them in perfectly with the width of the legs, but I ended up eating too much of that cake. Not to worry, I'll just cut a little circle detail. If it looks intentional, then it looks good, right? I couldn't make my mind up, and the jury was still out, so I got on with the final sand, trimmed the end profiles, and rounded over the underside. After a bit of thought, yeah, I don't love it, but I have one final trick up my sleeve, and if that fails, I can always just cut the rockers again. So the new plan is to fade the timber into the rebate like a wave. I chamfered the routed circle with a Dremel, which was tricky because the grain changes direction. Once I had got it roughly to the right angle, I pulled out the mouse sander. Yes, it's a mouse sander. Using that, I evened the transition and finished it off with a bit of hand sanding. I tested a bunch of finishes and patterns, but landed on a black Japan stain to the new timber and leaving the old varnish on the chair because it matches the windows in our house already. You could also sand back the chair and paint it whatever colour you wanted, but I'd rather shake hands with a spider than go for that sanding nightmare. I drilled a hole through the connection point and glued in a timber dowel to fix it all together. Using a flush cut saw, Wait, did you see that? Rewind, zoom in. There's a spider trying to shake my hand. Anyway, I cut the dowels off and then finished the rockers with hard wax oil for some added protection. Alright, I'll point out the obvious mistake, and that is, this rocking chair was made for me, so it's a little tall for my partner. I reckon I could fix that with a bar at the front for her feet later on. But it works, and that's the main thing. So there you have it, the Porchmaster 3000, the perfect chair to have a knit on a sunny winter's afternoon. And when the knitting's done, take a seat and live out your country dream, plunking away at the guitar on the front porch. Thanks for watching.